fascinated. It was how to love, how to flirt, how to... The chapters
That's right.
of
So the book has 9 chapters, and the
yeah.
chapters are how to flirt, how to keep it a secret, how to daydream, how to yearn, how to make it work, how to break up, things like this. So very contemporary. Anybody over the age of 16 will definitely relate to material in this book.
Hi, Suhas. Thank you for coming to the podcast. We appreciate your time.
Hi, Gladys. Wonderful to be here. So glad to be speaking to you. Thank you for
All
the
right.
invite.
Sorry?
Thank you for the invite. I'm really pleased to be here.
Great, great. Where are you in the world?
So I'm based in beautiful Toronto in Canada. I'm bang in middle of downtown, so very close to all of the touristy places that some of you might have seen.
All right. What are you doing in Toronto?
So in Toronto, I work as a scientist at what is probably the world's largest effort today towards using AI for scientific discovery. So this is called the Acceleration Consortium, and it's based at the University of Toronto. So the Canadian government has injected about $200 million just to study AI for science. And I'm bang in the center of that effort and really doing a lot of exciting things, building AI to discover materials for things like clean energy, healthcare, and a lot of other exciting science.
Oh, great, great, great. And for a layman person who is not a scientist, who is not in AI, what would you tell them that you do for a grade 1 student?
So you know all of the amazing technological innovations around us, for instance, all of the chips that are inside your phones, all of the LEDs that are inside your TVs. Discovering them takes a researcher around 20 years of effort. So it takes hundreds of researchers, 20 years of work to discover one of those things. With AI, I feel that you can actually cut short this process by something like 10 times. So in 2 years, you can actually get to the same sort of technological advancement by being able to rapidly sift through various kinds of materials that may or may not work. So that acceleration is what I do for a living.
All right. And I understand you studied, what did you do for your PhD? This is, whatever you're doing now is more of post PhD?
That's right. Yeah, this is more post PhD. So during my PhD, I worked on discovering materials for clean energy, so specifically for solar cells. So you know that in the context of climate change, how important moving towards wind and solar energy is. So I was working on finding ways to make solar energy 30% more efficient. And I did find certain ways of doing that. But I realized that the process of doing these things is so slow because it's a very laborious and manual process that needs a big team of scientists. So after my PhD, I thought, can we use AI to cut short this process? And I've been working more on that.
Interesting. And I know we met through Schmidt Science Fellowship.
That's right.
Yeah. We got the same Rhodes Scholarship, but I don't think we interacted at Oxford. So we've talked a lot after Oxford. For anyone who is considering applying for Schmidt Science Fellowship, what is this fellowship?
So I'd say that the Schmidt Science Fellowship is a fellowship for scientists who are really trying to acquire interdisciplinary skills and who believe in the power of interdisciplinary work. The fact that if you bring ideas from 2 or more fields together, then that can have a big impact on the discoveries you make. And this is actually really hard to do in conventional contexts because funders don't usually interact. Funding agencies are often discipline based, and Schmidt Science Fellows breaks down those barriers. So if you are a biologist who wants to apply ideas from say signal processing, you won't find a grant that does this elsewhere, but Schmidt Science Fellows may fund you to do that. So they believe in the power of interdisciplinary work.
And Schmidt Science Fellowship requires you to step outside your PhD area. Why did you want to switch gears after your PhD instead of doing what you did during your PhD?
I mean, one, I think that spending 4 or 5 years in a certain field gets you to 80 to 90% of what most people know in the field. So if you spend more time in it, then the gains are only incremental. Of course, you get papers out, but actually your learning becomes incremental. So to get new ideas, you need to look at new fields. So I wanted to switch to a field that would give me new ideas in my old field. And because I knew that in my old field of working on semiconducting materials physics, the bottleneck really is time. And I wanted to find ways of making these processes more efficient using robotics, using machine learning, using computation. So I switched to a computer and electrical engineering department, and I think it's really paid off. I'm really glad I did that.
Interesting. And talking about switching gears and exploring interests outside what you've been pursuing. So what I find interesting is that from materials to AI, physics, and all those things, to writing about love. Do you want to tell us more about the book you just published or that is coming out? Where do they meet the physics, the AI, and this other soft side?
I see. So thanks for bringing up that, Gladys. So this is my book that came out using HarperCollins through HarperCollins, and it's a book called How to Love in Sanskrit. And many of you may know what Sanskrit is, but many may not. So Sanskrit was the Latin of Asia for 2,000 years. It was the learned language of Asia, and people wrote science and literature and poetry and all kinds of things the way we use English as an international language for all purposes. And I have a very deep interest in languages, particularly ancient languages, and I've learned several of them as well. And this book, which I've co-authored with Anusha Rao, collects about 200 love poems. A lot of them have never been published before, some of them coming directly from rare manuscript libraries, and it translates them for a general audience. Now, what is the connection to physics? I feel the connection really is the sort of attention to detail you need, because when you're working with ancient texts, you should think of these texts as very imperfect beings. So they come in a way that's eroded. You can't read the letters properly. So there's a lot of restoration that has to go into them before you can even make sense of them. So in the same way that you would write down an equation and you would fit the parameters maybe. So there's, in that sense, there's a lot of ambiguity at work when you restore these verses. So I guess that rigor and that scientific aspect of it also interests me.
Mm-hmm. When did you get this idea, and how was the writing process? Because it's not something linear. It's a lot of research and sometimes challenges, and then also getting publisher. How was that process for you?
That's a really good question. So the book was sort of was in my head from a long time, because I knew that there's all this incredible literature out there that very few people can actually read, because the language is an ancient language. Not many people have the expertise. So I wanted to translate this for a long time, and we did keep translating things from time to time. Every time we would travel to a manuscript library, get a couple of manuscripts, things like this, and we translated it. But you really hit upon the right point, which is the publisher, which is really actually hard to do. And these days, if you want your book to really be recognized and sell, you need to do it with a good publisher who supports you. And it took a while to actually find a good publisher. HarperCollins was great, but it took a while of putting in a lot of pitches, talking to people who had published in similar domains, asking them to make introductions. So even though we say that the world is digital today and everything is interconnected, strangely everything actually still happens through personal contact. So it was just figuring out who in our personal networks has published books and going from there. Honestly, finding a publisher seems harder than writing a book. So if you want to write a book, maybe first try to find a publisher, or at least explore your network.
Totally agree. I totally agree, because in my case, when I wrote the PhD journey book, it was difficult getting a reputable publisher to publish, and I went kind of hybrid publishing route. So definitely, I definitely relate with the difficulty in getting someone reputable to do the job. Nice. So how are you with the process so far? Like the marketing, where is it? Is it published already? Is it out?
Yeah, so the book is already out and you can see it. It's in my hand. It's a very nice hardback. It has
Yeah,
about 300 pages. The
yeah.
marketing, of course, never ends. These days you just have to keep beating the drum, which is the sad reality of it. Uh, though I would very much like to write my second book, but
Mm.
I'm spending some time doing marketing right now. Yeah.
I like the colors, by the way, the mustard yellow and red.
Yeah,
Um,
it looks really nice, and
yeah,
it's sort of this. It has this golden sort of gloss to it. I don't know if you can
yeah.
make out on video. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Is there any standout or favorite part of the book that you can read? Maybe just 2 sentences.
Yeah, maybe I can read you something from the introduction. I'll read you a couple of lines.
Yes.
So this is maybe most of you don't really know about what Sanskrit poetry is about. So this is a little bit about that. So like all great literature, Sanskrit tells us something about love by typifying its farthest possible extremes. It is about the cruel hand of fate. It is about ecstatic lovemaking. It is about clever flattery and quarrels of passion. But more than anything else, it is about yearning at its extreme. Mad yearning that strikes you like thunder, seizes you with frenzy, and drowns you with grief. Um, so if you want to know more about this, these are basically the themes that are in the book, and I think it's written for a very general audience. So anybody who picks it up will probably enjoy it.
Yeah. Do you mind reading the chapters? I was fascinated. It was how to love, how to flirt, how to the
That's
chapters
right.
of
So
the
the book has 9 chapters, and the
yeah.
chapters are how to flirt, how to keep it a secret, how to daydream, how to yearn, how to make it work, how to break up, things like this. So very contemporary. Anybody over the age of 16 will definitely relate to material in this book.
Yeah. That is very interesting. I have to confess that I've not found a physicist who also writes about love. So very nice intersection. Let's go back to, because most of my audience are grad students, and they are always
Right.
curious to know how to go through mostly the PhD journey. So I want us to go back to your PhD and tell us what you did for your PhD, why did you choose to do that particular topic?
So my PhD was all about trying to discover high efficiency materials for solar cells. So how do we make solar cells that are 30% more efficient so we can beat climate change? That was the topic. And I would explore this topic from the lens of physics, a little bit of quantum chemistry, really quite an interdisciplinary focus on the whole thing. Uh, and I think the way I came to this is that one, I did my bachelor's in physics, and I was always really fascinated by semiconductors. So that was a long-standing interest that I had, and I discovered this maybe around in the third semester or fourth semester of my undergrad. And I had really good mentors. I did a bunch of internships that really solidified this interest. And by the time I was ready to start my PhD, uh, I'd already done quite a bit of work in semiconductors, and I felt I was ready to tackle challenges. And two, I really feel motivated by being able to work on a problem that has a social intersection to it. So I wanted to work on something that would have a tangible impact, and solar cells really fit the bill. So uh, and Oxford had one of the leading specialists in solar cells at that point. So it all came together really nicely. So I think that was the perfect thing for me to do.
Okay. Do you remember one? Just tell us one memorable moment from your PhD. And then I want to also focus on, because most of the time we talk about the positive sides. We are always posting pictures of graduation or when we are submitting our thesis, but we don't talk about the low sides, the imposter syndrome, failures, and all that. So tell us one memorable moment from your PhD, but also let's talk about the challenging side of grad school.
That sounds good. So, uh, Maybe one memorable moment of my PhD is that, so I used to spend a lot of time during my PhD studying things that were probably not directly related to my research. So maybe coding up libraries for various things, helping other people code up libraries for their calculations, things like this. And it so happened once that there was this problem that somebody in the group had, and a bunch of people were working on writing code for something for 6 months, some kind of a transformation code, and they did that for 6 months, and they didn't get the hang of it. And then I was sitting in one of these meetings one day, and they described the problem to me, and I said, okay, let me take a crack at it. And then in 1 hour, I actually managed to write the code to do that stuff that a team hadn't done in 6 months. Uh, and and that really worked because I had gone out of my way to study things that were not directly related to my PhD. So it had given me really quite a broad set of skills, and I was borrowing ideas from different fields that helped me crack this. So that really showed me that it's important to be broad. PhDs tend to, and supervisors also tend to prefer that the students be really deep because that's what get the papers. But if you want a longer term perspective, be broad. It's really important, and that also links to what I spoke about Schmidt Science Fellows at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly
Uh,
what I. Yeah. All right. Huh?
and you also wanted me to tell you about uh, maybe the downsides of being a grad student, something like that.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I think, I mean, being a grad student is wonderful. It was one of the best times of my life, but also it can sometimes be an intensely isolating experience because as a grad student, you're trying to break into a new field of knowledge that nobody necessarily knows. And that makes things really hard because there's nobody to talk to. Nobody even understands what you're doing. Uh, and in some sense, you're forced to be a lone wolf for several years at a time. So if you start grad school, you really have to make sure that you have a good community to do it with, because it's very easy to become a lone wolf, and that's not a good experience. So any of you starting grad school, please keep that in mind.
Okay, so the loneliness.
Absolutely, yeah, I think so.
Okay, and why? I think did I think you contributed to the PhD journey book, right?
I did, yeah. Thanks for that
Yes.
invite. I did.
Yes, and tell us why. Because when I was collecting feedback and thoughts from my friends on why they decided to do a PhD. Because it's not an easy thing. I mean, it's something you can manage, but it also takes a lot of time. Particularly if you do it in, I think in the UK it was pretty short, but I understand in places like US it can be more than 5 years. Some people do it up to 10. So it's a
Hmm.
long period of time. So I'm always curious to know why people chose to do a PhD. So in your case, why did you decide to do your PhD? And you studied under Rhodes Scholarship. How was it? How did you get to know about Rhodes Scholarship? And I assume you applied when you were in India?
That's right.
Okay. Why did you choose to do a PhD? And how did you get to know about Rhodes Scholarship? And then you will take us through the application process in India.
So I think when I was an undergrad, I did a couple of research internships. I did a research internship in Milan. I did a research internship in the Netherlands. And that really gave me a taste for research. I realized that research is what I really enjoy doing. And after I realized that, I think it was pretty obvious that a PhD is what I had to do because that is what you need to do to be able to do research. There are also other people who do PhD as the means to a career in something else. So maybe they want a career in consulting, and then a PhD in materials physics is nice if you want a consulting job at a VC firm that works on green tech. So people also do this, but I think that if you really enjoy research, you will love grad school. But if you're doing it as means to a different end, then you have to make sure that you tailor your experience such that it meets that expectation because grad school does revolve around research. Now, coming to the point about Rhodes, I knew about Rhodes because I'd heard about it specifically through names such as Bill Clinton or Siddhartha Mukherjee, who's one of my favorite authors, and several prime ministers of Australia who became who were Rhodes scholars. So I knew about it, and I never really thought that I fit the bill because I always had this impression that it was for a very specific kind of candidate that I probably did not fit the mold of. But I applied anyway, just thinking, grad school admissions are a stochastic thing. You just have to apply and see what happens. And then it worked out. And the application process in India is the same as application process for the Rhodes throughout the world. So you put in an application, you write a statement of purpose, a couple of other documents, and after that you have 2 or 3 levels of interviews. You have a technical interview, and after that you may have 1 or 2 more rounds of non-technical interviews. And some of these interviews are actually in person, so you actually have to go maybe to a different city where they're held, and they fly you there, and then you have the interview. Uh, I'm happy to talk more about this process, but this is the gist of it.
All right. Now we go to your undergrad, and you mentioned that you did your undergrad in physics.
That's right.
How did you get there? Why physics?
This is a really good question. Because, as high schoolers, we don't really know enough about the world to make an informed decision about what is it that we're going to study. In my case, I think it was largely driven by the fact that in physics there were people like Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking, and Mir publications from the former Soviet Union that did a really good job of writing pop science books on physics. So as a child, as a high school student, I had access to these books that really made me excited about physics. I can't really say that I knew what physics really was till I got into it, but these books got me excited. So that was really my reason, and it was exciting. Once I actually became a student of physics, I fell in love with it. But now that I've actually seen the world, I've been in the world of research for a long time, I also feel that maybe neuroscience is equally exciting, mathematical ecology is equally exciting. So if people had actually written the pop science books for that, I might have actually become a mathematical ecologist. Who knows? But my advice to grad students watching this or people applying to grad school is generally be open. The world is larger than you think it is. So if you think you're interested in particular something, probably extend far beyond that. You probably will be happy doing other things as well.
Okay, great. So tell us about, just briefly, did you grow up in India, and how was it? You studied most of your schooling there, I think, until undergrad. So how paint a picture for us. How was it growing up in India and studying all the way to undergrad before you moved out of India?
So I grew up in Bangalore, which is a city in South India, which is actually where all of the software outsourcing happens to. So it's sort of the mini Silicon Valley in India. So you everywhere you go, you find software engineers. So there's naturally a lot of pressure on me to become a software engineer or an engineer, which is what most people in my age group did. But I think was a sort of a maverick who decided I'll do something totally different. My schooling was pretty ordinary. I went to a school that was very close to where I lived purely for reasons of geographical proximity. So I wouldn't say it was anything special, but my undergrad was rather special because it was a bunch of people who all decided that they wanted to do pure sciences, drawn from all over the country, and extremely motivated people because you don't do these things unless you're really motivated. So, and our coursework was actually based on the same undergrad program that runs at Berkeley with the same labs and everything. So we really got a solid education, and that really helped a lot because when I came out of undergrad, I immediately felt like I was ready for grad school. And this was a public university. This was not a private university or anything. And I think I was paying fees of something like $100 a year, not more than that. So it was actually really heavily subsidized by the Indian government as well. A very, very fine program that the Indian government should probably replicate in all over the country. And I also think the success of my undergrad program can also show us by the fact that already just in my cohort, we already have 3 Schmidt Science Fellows.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure that if you wait for a couple more years, every year you will see 1 or 2 Schmidt Science Fellows just from my cohort. So
from same undergrad uni?
Yeah, so just from my year, there were 2 Schmidt Science Fellows, and from the year that came after me, there are 2 more. So it's quite a remarkable number of accomplished people that it's managed to put out.
What's the name of the school? Maybe we should all be going there.
Yeah, it's called the Indian Institute of Science.
Okay. What do you think they are doing right, especially like bringing out scientists in you guys?
I think it was because from the very start, it was a very research-oriented program. So from the day you set foot in the university, it's sort of you live in this atmosphere where everybody is doing research, and the undergrads are also expected to participate in research. And the undergrads are actually a very small part of the university. There are 100 undergrads, but there are about 1,500 PhD students in the university. So it's the whole thing really is very, very research oriented. So I think that sort of drives the whole thing forward.
Okay, nice. All right. And at least that gave you like a strong foundation for what came after, especially as a researcher.
Yes, absolutely. I think I would say that I learned more in those 4 years of my undergrad than in any other period of my life. It was very intense, but I think one needs to really spend those 4 years of your undergrad learning things in a very intense fashion, because unless you have the fundamentals right, it's really hard to build on top of them. So especially mathematical fundamentals. You can pick up other kinds of things later on in life, but if your mathematical fundamentals are not there, and you try to do something like physics or computation or mathematics later on, it becomes challenging. So get those fundamentals right.
Now I'm curious to know, because you did mention that after that while you were in undergrad, I suppose you did some internship abroad in Milan, in Netherlands. I'm curious to know if you were to go back then, maybe was it 10 years ago, thereabout?
Yeah, maybe 8 years ago.
Okay, so about say 8 years back, if you were taken back to Indian Institute of Science in first year, would you, knowing what you know now, would you choose the same path, or is there something you would add or remove?
I think I would definitely add some things, also maybe remove some things.
Okay.
And one, I feel that I spent quite a lot of time, reading textbooks, solving problems by myself, things like that. But really, real learning happens by being able to distinguish between what's important and what's not important when you're in a certain field. Because a textbook is going to be 600 pages big, but not all of it is really going to be very relevant. So I find that talking to people who are actually involved in research or in whatever field you are on a day-to-day basis really helps. And I should have gone to those office hours. Nobody would go to office hours. Professors would have office hours, but nobody would ever go to them. I should have gone to those office hours, chatted with professors, figured out what sort of things people are talking about, thinking about in different fields. That would probably have changed the trajectory of what I did quite a bit. That's one. And two, I think I should have actively sought out mentors. So that's something that I did not do. Even in terms of mentors for my undergrad final year thesis, it was somebody whom the university assigned to me, and I said, okay, I'll go with them. But I never really made an effort to find mentors, ask them questions, get advice from them. And I think everybody should do that. I do that now. I have a bunch of mentors that I talk to regularly, but start doing that early.
I like asking these questions because I think even me personally, if I was to go back to undergrad, there are so many things that I might adjust with the power of hindsight now. So hopefully, like these stories and lessons, the guys coming after us, they can learn. And Suhas,
Yeah.
I'm also curious to know, because you are a highly accomplished young career person, an author, Rhodes Scholar, Schmidt Science Fellow. What would you say is your favorite or proudest accomplishment out of all this?
This is really hard to say, because accomplishments, you can only gauge them after giving a little bit of maybe a couple of years of gap. So it's really hard to gauge 10 years down the line what thing that I've done is probably going to be the most impactful or I can be proud of. I think what I am proud of is not any particular thing I've done. Maybe I can answer that 10 years down the line, but I'm really proud of the fact that every single thing that I put out is always of high quality. So if you can take anything that I've written generally and give it to an expert in that field, and they will say, yes, this has had a lot of thought put into it, and this is generally in the 95th percentile. So I think maintaining that quality in all spheres of your life takes a lot of effort, and I have developed and I've cultivated a lifestyle where I try and manage to do that. So I'm proud of that.
Interesting. Wow, I love that. I love that. And how do you manage to do that? To keep balancing, say your research at 95 percentile, your writing your books and all these things you do outside. How are you able to balance all that?
I don't think it requires balance. I think it just requires cultivating a personality where you're simply not willing to cut corners. So, we always uh, we always receive temptations from various sides to cut corners. So a grad student or an undergrad student may be tempted to actually choose an easier course, where it's easier to get an A grade, over a more difficult course where you learn more, but you may get a B grade. A grad student may choose an easy paper, a flashy paper, over something that actually makes impact. But I think we should all have the courage at every point to choose what is actually beneficial in the long run over prioritizing short-term gains. And I think developing a mindset to do that enables all of this. It's not any particular kind of skill that one is born with.
Okay. No, I get that. Okay. So lastly, just because of time, let's wrap this up. And I'm curious to know from your eyes or your perspective, when you look at the world, where you stand, what do you see is very wrong in the world that if you had all the powers you would change?
There are, of course, many answers to this question, but
Yes, no,
but I'm
on
not
top of the
qualified to.
list.
I'm not qualified to speak about all of the answers because I can't talk about, for instance, problems in healthcare. I don't have the background for that. So one problem that I can speak confidently about is energy. So I feel that the absolute inequity in the access to energy that we have today. So a person in the US maybe consumes 100 times more energy per capita than somebody in India or somebody in Kenya or somebody in Uganda. And this is a real travesty because energy is what drives progress. And there's a nice scaling relationship between how developed a country is and how much energy it has access to. And the question really now, I think, for the world is how do we provide energy to every country in the world at the same level as a developed country without increasing carbon emissions? And a lot of my work deals with this, developing technologies, materials for this. But we definitely need more people to work on this. Lots of different kinds of technologies, attack angles. So if any of you are thinking of grad school in physics, chemistry, material sciences, this is something that you should absolutely be looking at. And feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you about any of this.
Okay, excellent. I'll leave your LinkedIn link on the description box and the students can get in touch, those who are interested in the energy efficiency, AI, and physics. But finally, you mentioned that you would be keen to give away your books to maybe 2 or 3 people in India, US, or UK. Do you want to speak about that? And we can leave a Google form and people can leave their names there.
Perfect. That sounds great. So I would be really happy to ship 2 copies, 2 or 3 copies to readers, and just fill out that form. And I'd also love to hear from you what you think of the book. But even beyond the book, I am really generally happy to speak to young people about their interests, about advice, about applications, about anything really, because I have received a lot of help from various people about things, and I'm keen to give back. So. Happy to talk to anyone. Just shoot me an email or send me a message on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Suhas, and we appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gladys. Really, really pleased to be here today.
Bye.